So let's go ahead and get started with our special guest. His name is Aaron Baker, and he is taking a brave fight. He is fighting against and running against Congressman Randy Fine. Let's go ahead and bring him in. What's going on, Aaron? Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So you decided to do something I think many of us have been waiting to happen. Congressmember Randy Fine has been, I got to say, I've heard a lot of things in my lifetime, but he has said really vile, disgusting comments against Muslim Americans. He's just been very crude. First and foremost, why did you decide to run against him? And please explain to us, how is it that someone like Randy Fine was able to win? Was he this way prior to his congressional race, or did he change after he got into Congress?
So this seat came open. This was Congressman Waltz's seat, who's now the UN ambassador. He was Waltz was appointed by Trump to National Security Advisor after Trump won the election. So then we had an open seat. Back in the early part of President Trump's election, or in the late part when they were running short on funds, Randy Fine and a group that he raised money with, they donated about $500,000 to President Trump's campaign. So to me, it's pay for play. It's, politics as usual. You donate to somebody else's campaign, and then all of a sudden you're the chosen one, if you will. So he got the president's nod. He was always just this bombastic. They couldn't stand him in the Florida legislature. He lives in Brevard County. He doesn't live in the congressional district, so he lives about, as Governor DeSantis says, about 100 miles that way.
Wait, so he doesn't live in that district?
No. No. It's not required under the Constitution. The Constitution says that you have to live in the state in which you represent. That's a specific language there. So there are Congress people that don't live in their district. He just happens to be one of them, one of very few. So I was approached during the special election by a group of Republicans, and they said, Aaron, this guy is no good. If you compare him to the Grinch, it makes the Grinch look like somebody that you would want to live next door to. And I'm quoting Mr. Fine's language. He literally called a school board member a whore. He withheld funding from the Brevard Zoo because he couldn't have a political fundraiser there. He was ordered to court order anger management for flipping off a judge in a Zoom appearance. So, I mean, he has this history that we all knew about. If you look through his campaign finance, he goes to Las Vegas, spends $15,000 on entertainment expenses, who knows what that is, and bills it back to his campaign as just entertainment expenses. I don't think any normal Floridian living in the 6th congressional district has the ability to, basically take a work trip to Las Vegas and spend $15,000 on an average weekend. So we knew what we were up against. The problem is, in Florida's special election setup, this was announced right before Christmas of last year. So you're not going to go knock on people's doors in Christmas and, basically between Christmas and New Year's. So it gave us the month of January this year to run a campaign for a special election where my average cost per vote was $6 in the primary. His was over $100 because he's just such a reprehensible person. But if you send enough mail to enough primary voters, then they're like, oh, well, President Trump endorsed him. He's got to be the golden child. We all knew what we were going to get once he got there. So, I mean, literally the day after his election, his general election in April, I filed the paperwork to run against him again because I understand his mentality. In Brevard County, where he lives, he's known as the bully of Brevard. And that's exactly what he does. He's a big bully. And sometimes you need to stand up to that schoolyard bully and tell him, no, it's not right to hate an entire, uh, it's not right to hate every single Muslim on the planet, for example. It's not right to hate every Jewish person on the planet. It's not right to hate every Christian person. You go down the list. It's his heart is filled with hate.
Yeah. So he's been this way. Yeah, I
He's
was
been
I
this
was
way.
curious. I
Yeah.
was curious about that.
And they
Okay.
could not wait to get him out of the legislature in Florida, in Tallahassee, because he's just the bombastic buffoon that he is. I mean, now he's on the national stage and says the most outrageous things. You can go through any of his tweets. I don't have to do, it's a funny business because you get all these people and they're like, well, we can do political opposition research. I don't need to do any opposition research. Just wait for him to open his mouth, and day after day, he doesn't let us down.
Yeah, I want to show people an example of that. This is more recent, and he shared this himself, by the way. This is not
Right.
shared by just another X account. So he is sharing his statement here. Representative Fine on how to deal with mainstream Muslims. I just want you guys to hear what he said here.
I don't know how you make peace with those who seek your destruction. I think you destroy them first. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. I don't know how you make peace with those who seek your destruction. I think you destroy them first. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
So that's Randy Fine. That's who Aaron is running against. Many people are saying that he should be censured for his statements. He's very, very he's an Islamophobe, and he doesn't hide it. And another thing about Randy, for those who are not familiar with him, Track APAC has really been on him. And they're also saying censure Randy Fine, expel Randy Fine. Randy Fine is another one that takes a lot of money, over $450,000 here from APAC. Another one they had here, they made a screenshot of some of the things that he said. The first one here says Palestinian is just another word for demon. The next one here says, tell your fellow Muslim terrorists to release the hostages and surrender. Until then, starve away. He said that to Rashida Tlaib, by the way, for those, if you can't see this that well. He also said, none. May the streets of Gaza run red with their blood. He's very vile and crude, and nobody has filed any type of motion to censure Randy Fine, but they did, of course, choose to censure Rashida Tlaib. This is someone, again, Aaron, that is just very crude. And I'm wondering, how do you fight back against someone like Randy that has so much money from APAC?
Well, it seems like a monumental task, but it really isn't. The most number of votes that any Republican has ever received in the primary was Governor DeSantis when this was his congressional district. He held the seat before Congressman Waltz. He received 42,000 votes in the primary. So you're not looking for millions and millions of votes. This is a district that President Trump won by 30 points. Randy Fine underperformed that. He won by 14 points. So he underperformed Trump literally right after Trump's election by 16 points. They had to spend a ton of money dragging him, kicking and screaming over the finish line because basically Randy Fine doesn't like people. He likes to go to Washington. He likes to be the center of attention. He doesn't want to get out like I do. Every single day, I'm out there doing different events. Yesterday, I had a parade that I went to in the morning, went to the Wreaths Across America from 12 to 2, went to Grinch Fest, where we set up a tent, and I had volunteers that went ahead of time, set up a tent, and we collect petitions to get on the ballot because there are two ways to get on the ballot. You can pay $10,440, which I had done in the special election, or you can collect 5,373 candidate petitions, which we're in the process of doing right now. I have a whole bunch to turn in, and I've already started turning them in. So there are ways to save money as a grassroots candidate, if you will, and ways to spend your money wisely. I go to a lot of different events where the cost is very low or even minimal. I know this time of year there are a million Christmas parties, and today was, when we were going back and forth through days, today was one of the few days that I actually had nothing on my calendar today, and it's especially in December, until you get up to about Christmas Eve, and then it just drops off till after the first of the year. We've created our own software with all the voter data. So we will literally go door to door, and our goal is to target the top 100,000 Republican voters in this district. And whether that's, if we're going to be able to knock on 100,000 doors once, that's great. And then, the more times that you can get there, the better. So there are cost-effective ways for us to do this where we don't need, $10-12 million that it's estimated that he spent. For us, this is a campaign of probably $500,000 to $1 million. So you do need some money, but you just don't need buckets and buckets of money because, obviously I'm running against what I think is probably the worst Republican in the entire House of Representatives.
Yeah, he's really bad. Question here, and I want to go through your policy platform. I want to start with foreign policy
Sure.
because I think this is a big one. One of the things I noticed that you mentioned here for foreign policy is that basically, long story short, that you will prioritize U.S. taxpayers and national interests. You're calling out all the money that is going to whether it's Israel or any other country, instead of using those funds and resources to help people here in the United States. There seems to be this divide that is happening right now, especially within the Republican Party, that many of us have been paying attention to. And I've been talking about a lot on this show, where there seems to be a segment that is backing and supporting Donald Trump at every measure, regardless if he's doing something wrong. And then there's another side where it's more like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, they are calling out that this is not what people voted for. This is not America first, and we need to take care of our interests right here at home. I got to be honest, Aaron, this is the first time I've heard Republicans kind of say that we need to take care of people here and also that we need to focus on affordability. Can you talk a little bit about that?
100%. The poverty rate in this congressional district is 14.6%. That's 3.5 points higher than the national average. I don't care how affordable Washington tells us everyday life is. For me, I see it every single day. Look at how much gas the person in front of you gets or paid for when you go to the gas pump. I just challenge every one of your viewers to do that. Look and see how much the person in front of you got. Now, I own a small business. I'm business partners with a general contractor. So I have the ability to stop and fill up my truck, okay? But it breaks my heart when the person in front of me got $4 worth of gas, $5 worth of gas, $8 worth of gas. That is somebody that is trying to get to work and home from work, and that's it. We're not talking about living paycheck to paycheck. We're talking about living day to day. And it is not acceptable to me that we continue to give billions and billions and billions of dollars away to the rest of the world, and we are not taking care of our people right here at home. We have to do a better job. I had a lady ask me the other day, she said, well, I want to make sure that you'll still support Israel. And I said, ma'am, until we have zero homeless veterans in this congressional district, I'm not supporting any foreign country. So I don't think I'm in the Tucker camp. I think Tucker is, I grew up watching Tucker. I've watched him for the last 20 years. I think he's drifted off a little bit. Candace, I think she's drifted off a lot. But I'm more in the Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene camp of let's just do what's right for Americans. Let's help the people here. When I go to the grocery store and I get 8 things and it's $102, how do people afford to live? I mean, it's almost impossible. You know, a sad story, but happy ending. One of the construction sites that we're working on down by the Orlando airport, it's an area that's known where people will dump their dogs. Okay. So I was working on an addition that we were building for a homeowner down there. And here comes this husky just bebop up to the back of the house. And the lady said, Aaron, did you see the dog? And I'm like, what dog? And I mean, she's covered in dirt. She's covered in just stink. And you could tell that she'd been out for a couple weeks out on the street. No chip, no collar, no tag, filed a missing, or in Florida, you can file a found pet report, meaning that if somebody is missing their pet, like if the pet got out of the yard or something, you can file a found pet report, and it goes through their system to make sure that no one's missing this pet. She's sitting on my couch right now. We've had her for about 3 months. But the whole point is we're at a point in this country right now where people can't afford to feed their pets.
Yeah.
So if people can't afford to feed their pets, people can't afford to feed their kids. None of us can afford health care. I don't care how much money you have. You can't afford health care right now. And it's not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. This is a congressional issue where we have had 15 years to do something about the Affordable Care Act, and neither side has done a damn thing about it. We have to do better as a country.
So I'm glad that you mentioned healthcare, because like me personally, I support universal healthcare. I am to the left of the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party, with the exception of a couple of politicians that are there, don't even support universal healthcare. But one of the biggest complaints I hear from people, even in my state, in Massachusetts, is the healthcare issue. People just can't afford it. Depending on what kind of job you have, can determine what your coverage is going to be. You have no control over that. The premiums continue to increase, but people's salaries aren't increasing. This is a really big one. When I look at people like you and Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, in my mind, I feel like you guys should have your own political party. I said the same thing about members of the squad, to be honest with you. I said the same thing about AOC and all of them. That should be a separate political party, because I feel like the leadership in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are not allowing the populist positions to be brought to the floor for a vote. If you were to win against Randy Fine, how would you deal with that? How would you deal against fighting back against the Republican Party leadership?
Well, do what Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene did. You start filing discharge petitions to get legislation. If the leadership won't take up the legislation that you want, example, the Epstein list, and now Marjorie Taylor Greene is going through filing discharge petitions on different things before she leaves Congress. If the leadership isn't listening to what needs to happen, then I mean, we obviously have to do something different. I don't know what happened to Washington back when I grew up and Reagan was president, Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House. You know, they hated each other between the hours of 9 and 5. At 5 o'clock, they could sit down and have an Irish whiskey. You know, this was politics almost at its best, where they knew that they had to work together because it was a House divided. It's a Democratic House and a Republican president. We don't have that anymore. We still, right now, we have a Republican House, Republican Senate, Republican president, and nothing is getting done. They just passed legislation to codify 15 executive orders into law through the House, and we'll see what the Senate does. But I mean, we've been at this a year. That's the first thing that they've done. They can't even agree on a continuing resolution to keep the government open. And it's the most ridiculous thing that you've ever seen or heard of, because as soon as they reopen the government, then they just back pay all the government employees. So government being open should not be an option. It should. I really do support Thomas Massey and his approach to continuing resolutions, if you will, where it's 12 separate bills that are passed. Okay, we know that we're going to keep the government open. That's one. We know that we're going to pay the military. That's two. And then you go down the list so that we don't have these issues in the future. And I'll work with any members of Congress. It's once you're elected, you're elected as a Republican, as a Democrat, but you're elected to represent every single person in your congressional district. That's about 900,000 people. And I only have 291,000 registered Republicans. So the other 2/3 are either not registered to vote, registered Democrat, registered NPA, registered independent. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you are there to represent every single one of your constituents and be a voice for them. And that's the complete opposite of what we have right now.
Well, I agree with you that people are just they're not really trying to benefit the working class. A lot of these people, I think, are
No.
looking out for their political careers or how many books they can write, how many speaking fees that they can obtain. But another thing I noticed too on your website, this one actually shocked me. I want to show everyone this here. You have a policy here for criminal injustice and law enforcement. And one of the things you mentioned here is that you support reform, criminal justice reform, working towards that. Now, again, I'm further to the left in the Democratic Party, so I know you and I don't agree on a number of things. I would say shut it all down. I would say defund the police, etc. But this is the first time I've seen, again, a Republican candidate want to work on criminal justice reform. When I looked at your platform, to me, this kind of stood out as like an independent campaign. So two things I'm curious. Why did you decide not to run as an independent? And then two, why this desire to work on criminal justice reform?
Well, I grew up in a Republican family. I was born in Florida, but grew up in Western Kentucky. And my family was always very involved in politics. My grandfather used to own a business right on North Main Street and owned basically the entire city block. And he had one little office building that he turned into Republican headquarters every election season. So from the time I was 8 years old, handing out Bush Quail signs and Bush Quail bumper stickers I've been a Republican. So I believe that the Republican Party can be fixed, but we have to get back to a point where both political parties work in the best interest of the people. To criminal justice reform, I think that there are still injustices happening. I mean, you see, and this probably leans more toward the libertarian side. You see that a lot of the marijuana issues in different states, for example, are heavily criminalized. But I think if the federal government changes the classification on that, which they're expected to do, then that's really going to change the way a lot of these crimes are looked at. Now, as far as if you're talking about raising the threshold for shoplifting from $300 for a felony up to $1,000, I don't support that at all. I think that Florida has done a very good job and really stands kind of shoulders above a lot of the northern, and I have family in Maryland, so I'm back and forth and between here, Maryland, DC area, quite a bit. But I've seen, anytime you go to Baltimore City, I mean, the entire town smells like pot. I don't want that here. I don't want that in Florida. Now, if that's decriminalized to a certain extent, I think it's going to kind of ease the burden on a lot of law enforcement. It's going to free up some resources there. But at the same time, that's more toward the libertarian side of being a Republican than being the mainstream, good old boy Republican club. So I think there's still room in the Republican Party for somebody that has a common sense voice, and that's what I hope to be.
So I think that's where we also disagree. I don't believe that the Republican Party can be reformed. I don't believe the Democratic Party can be reformed, not because of people like yourself, but because of the big money interests. I think that corporate money has to get out of electoral politics for that change to happen. But I will say, and I'll make this very clear, you are the first Republican candidate to come onto this show, the very first. And there's a number of politicians, they will not come on here. They will not come on here, Aaron. They look at like what I support and what I stand for, and they're like, no, I'm good. So kudos to you.
But why can't we have a reasonable conversation? That's all I want, is I just want to have a reasonable conversation.
I don't know.
You and I aren't yelling and screaming back and forth. We're saying here's policy. And we might not agree on it, but hey, we're talking about it.
Yeah, a lot of political candidates will not come on to. I mean, the third party candidates will most likely come on. Some of the Democrat candidates will come on, but even in the Democratic Party, some of them won't come on either. Like they don't want. So I will say, kudos for you for coming on. One thing that I want to bring up as well, I thought this was also interesting. You mentioned, I want to put this back up here. You did mention Social Security. You talked about Social Security and healthcare. You're in favor of Social Security. You're not trying to say it should go away. This is a big one, but also environmental concerns. I want to hear a little bit from you about this, because again, I was also surprised that this was also on your platform, your concerns about the environment.
So I think that most people, I think Florida Republicans specifically are quite different because we have a state where we spend a lot of time outside hunting, fishing, swimming. This congressional district has the entire Ocala National Forest right in the middle of it. So it makes it a pain because you always have to drive around it unless you want to drive through it, and it's not the best roads. But we love the environment. I mean, we have a lot of springs, natural springs that are absolute pristine. We want to keep that. If you see, I was actually very proud. One thing that I'll agree with Congressman Fine on, he was one of every single congressional member in the state of Florida that does not want offshore drilling off the coast of Florida. Every single congressional member in Florida signed that letter to President Trump saying, no, we don't want that. So we really do. We have infrastructure needs here where we have to address flooding, and we have a lot of needed infrastructure here. So I think Florida Republicans are just built different as far as the environment goes. We want clean air, clean water, and we want our skies to be absolute pristine, beautiful. It might not be the case all across the planet, but I guess Florida's just a little special.
That is interesting. Well, you are not alone, and I do want to show this to people. I announced this when this video dropped on the show. There is an organization called AZAPAC. They are fighting back against organizations like lobby interest groups like APAC. Also, they mentioned Kufi on their website, and they also mentioned J Street, not just APAC. I think that's a really important part. And you have some comrades that are joining you because you are also a part of AZAPAC. I just want to play a part of this here.
This blind allegiance, this veto on our national sovereignty, this denial of reality must end. We've had more than enough. AZAPAC isn't here to beg. We're here to evict. We're backing warriors who spit in the face of this cabal. Jose Vega in New York, confronting the uniparty machine. He's challenging APAC darling Richie Torres. Mike Wilnaugh in Florida, an America-only patriot challenging Daniel Webster, a fossilized incumbent who serves everyone but the American people. Aaron Baker, also in Florida. He rejects APAC bribes and demands an end to the foreign aid grift. He's challenging the biggest Zionist of them all, Randy Fine.
Tucker Carlson is the most dangerous anti-Semite in America.
AZAPAC isn't a protest, it's a reclamation. America
So this is, I have to say, this ad is freaking awesome. I can't play the whole thing because I can't show something like the explosions, but I think this is awesome, and more things like this need to happen. But this is nonpartisan because you guys have Jose Vega, you have yourself, and then also Mike.
Hmm. And there are different organizations like a New Policy PAC, also that are, that we talk to all the time. And it's not, to your point, it's not a partisan issue. APAC is not partisan. They give money to over 90% of the members of Congress. They don't care if you're a Republican. They don't care if you're a Democrat. They simply just want you to keep the printing press at the Federal Reserve on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to get as much money overseas as they can possibly get. And at some point, enough is enough. Stop printing money. Every dollar that is printed by the Federal Reserves makes every dollar that you and I have worth less.
Well, some people from MMT, from modern monetary theory, would say that the Fed can continue to print money. They would say the federal government can also mint a coin and pay for a lot of these things, a lot of the issues that we have here. But I get your point. I guess my question is, in your district, what has been the response from people about what is happening in Gaza, about Israel? What are you hearing from constituents on the ground?
Most people are horrified by it. I mean, anybody with, more than 3 brain cells, you look at what's happening and you're either in the Randy Fine camp or you're horrified. Most everyday citizens are horrified. The issue is, it is a closed primary state. If it were not a closed primary state, I would have 900,000 votes versus Randy Fine. But it's closed primary, meaning only Republicans can vote. So, we have to get people to turn off Fox News and actually use their brain and think, is it good when a politician signs a warhead that we're sending overseas to kill women and children? Charlie Kirk said it best himself. He said the plan is to ethnically cleanse 2 million people. Okay, well, there you go. That was what Charlie Kirk said.
Aaron, are you concerned about these pastors that just went to Israel? 1,000 pastors went there, and they said they're trying to bring 10,000 more to send this message back to their congregation that they need to support Israel?
I think anybody should be concerned. I mean, if we had 1,000 pastors that went to communist China, what would the response be? If we had 1,000 pastors that went to North Korea, if we had 1,000 pastors that went to any foreign country, if we had 1,000 pastors that went to France and then came back, we would be like, what's going on here? So to say that it's okay that one specific foreign country has this much influence, it's not right. And it doesn't matter if it's Israel, if it's Qatar, if it's whatever foreign country is, trying to buy influence that day. Yesterday I've been working with a national media company, and we're going to start billboards along I-95. And it simply says, Aaron Baker for Congress, no foreign money in politics. That's it. We need to get the foreign influence out of our politics. We have to start taking care of Americans. And I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, purple, brown, black, white. The level of influence by outsiders is just not acceptable to me.
And I think that's where you and I agree. I'm tired of it. I've had enough. I don't know how the homelessness rate is in your area, but I can tell you it just continues to increase, at least here in the Boston area and in Massachusetts. I just don't see these things. And then there's a site, I don't know if you've seen this, Aaron. There's a website called Out of Reach. Every year they distribute a report about the cost of living in the United States, and they rank each state. Florida has been increasing over the years. Florida is getting closer and closer to that top 10. And it just goes to show you that this problem can't be solved by telling people just move to a state where the cost of living is cheaper. Because as someone who lived in the Northeast, that's a big thing up here where people say, oh, we'll just move to Florida. So people moved to Florida, and now Florida is becoming more expensive because obviously the demand is increasing. And that makes the supply, more expensive. It's just, I really think people need to understand that affordability is a big issue for a lot of people in this country. And I would say anybody who, as you said some people live in day to day, not just paycheck to paycheck. It takes me back to 2008 moments, 2008, when people were dealing with that, where they could only let's just put $5 in the gas tank so this can get me to work and get me back home. And I do feel like when you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, the leadership, they're not focusing on the affordability crisis in this country.
No, they're so out of touch. I mean, Congressman Fine is worth about $30 million, and that's fine. Whatever. I think that we have become accustomed to electing people that are so out of touch with everyday going to the grocery store. I mean, I go to Sam's Club because Publix is so freaking expensive. I don't know how anybody can afford to buy anything at Publix. I think up north you have Safeway instead of Publix, so or whatever the grocery store.
We have Shaw's, and that's like our Publix. It's just as expensive.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm forced to drive, roughly 20 miles to Sam's Club, which I do, every week, every other week, to get the necessities that I need. But affordability, I've said it 1,000 times in this election cycle, until Republicans wake up and don't tell us how cheap everything is and how much better the economy is. I don't care if gas is $2.92 a gallon or $2.77 a gallon. That does not make that big of a difference. I understand it trickled down and eventually it'll make a little bit of difference. But right now, at this given time, when people can't afford groceries, Republicans have to start talking about affordability. And that's my advice to the Democrats also. Talk about nothing else. Nothing else. Don't talk about anything other than affordability. And whoever talks about affordability will win the midterms. But the Republicans right now can't get their head out of their ASS and listen to what's going on the ground, because we're so out of touch with reality. 90% of our elected leaders are just simply so out of touch. I mean, they probably, the old saying, a flyover district. Well, the flyover district, this is what we've created for Randy Fine. He lives 100 miles south, so he flies over Monday morning to Washington, flies back Friday, or if he even comes home. I know that when he first got elected, he had told Marjorie Taylor Greene that he was excited to be able to move to Washington and live there, and had no interest in living in the congressional district. We have to do better. We just have to do better. And I believe that I'm not perfect, but I can guarantee you I can do 1,000 times better than he can.
Well, Aaron, good luck to you. Good luck to you. Randy Fine is absolutely repulsive. I have been in the beginning, I was shocked by some of the things that he said, and now I've just become accustomed to it. And that's the even more scarier part, that there is someone in Congress that is saying those things. And I actually consider him to be very dangerous. So good luck to you. And where can people follow your campaign?
FLAaron.com.
All right, Aaron.
LAARON.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you very much for having me. I greatly appreciate being on your show.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.